What is going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of ToyShopFab and part 2 of figuring out how to fit 73 to 87 square body springs underneath this 62 Chevy pickup. Yep, that's right. Part 2 of trying to fit a square body lift underneath a 62 Chevy pickup. If you have not watched or seen part 1, please go back, check it out. That way you get kind of an understanding on what it is we are trying to do with this truck. So go ahead and I'll wait. Oh, you're back. Right on. So what'd you think? Did you give it a thumbs up? Appreciate it. Now, so if you have watched it, then you know that we were able to fit a set of our 6-inch lift square body springs under the front of this truck by shaving 1/4 of an inch off each side of our spring in order to fit a polyurethane bushing on it and into the factory 62 Chevy mount up front. We did swap out the factory 62 rear swing shackle mounts with a set of updated or newer style square body mounts. As you can see there, we did have to clearance our body mount there, give our shackles room to move, right? Did not want those crashing into our body mount. So the front is pretty much set up. A couple little things I still need to catch up on, like shock mounts and stuff like that. But for the most part, that's about where I want it. And I ended off that video saying I need to do some homework or take a look or study to try to figure out exactly what it is or how I want to do the rear. Now, if you've ever tried this on a 62 Chevy pickup with factory suspension, you probably just frame swapped it, right? You got one for a Blazer. Figured it'd be a lot less work, and it probably is, really. But I've always been a huge fan of trying to keep the factory frames underneath this, and plus things like this help me expand, right? It helps me with my creativity, helps me find, look things, do things, just, can we make this work? So, I always like keeping factory frames, if I can. So, here's what I've done. Now, I've already managed to mock up the passenger side of this truck. That way, on the driver's side, it'll kind of seem like I know what I'm talking about. But if you've never, I want to show you this. We're gonna do the educational part of this video because this is kind of cool. Normally, I haven't screwed with shackles like this before. On my 59 may have had them, but I just went ahead and cut them all off and updated them anyways, right? So I didn't deal with them. And then when I got to this one, I played around with them. I wanted to see what made them work. And, well, if you've never dealt with them before, here's how they work. So here's the rear spring off our passenger side, and you can see we have a huge bronze or brass bushing pressed into the eyelet of this spring. Now that opening there rides on this pin. You can see it's got a grease fitting on it. Let's see if I can get it out of here. Probably not. Come on. Hold on. All right, let's get this out of here. Let's get something in there, kind of work it out. All right, cool. Got it out. So here's the pin that goes in our spring mount here, our spring perch. And this guy here fits up inside here. Our spring rides on that pin there. Here's our grease fitting, our grease zert. Grease gets pumped in, comes out. I don't know if you can tell, but there is a hole right there where the grease comes out. Everything is held in place on this perch here by this guy there. And if you can notice on our big old pin, we have a notch in there. Now this notch, when you push it all the way in, lines up with this hole and gets held in that big pin, gets held in by a place with this little pin. Now you can see we got kind of a flat edge here because that flat edge is going to ride up inside that notch. So when you put this guy in here, that flat edge rides on that flat edge. That nut will suck, when you tighten it, will suck this guy in, creating a extremely tight fit between here, our shackle mount, and this pin. And that is what keeps everything in place on the back end of this truck. Actually pretty stout little setup, but they don't use that setup anymore, and is also the reason why is it extremely hard to find a lift kit for these trucks. Now you could go out and do what this guy has done, or whoever lifted this truck has done. Actually my buddy, believe it or not, but he's got, this truck may have come this way. So, but you can see underneath there, we have got long U-bolts and a 4-inch block. Now most 4-6-inch kits will come that way, right? You'll get a 2-inch block, you'll get a 4-inch block, or some of the lift kits, you'll get a bigger overload spring, like that big thick guy on the bottom there, to attach to the bottom of your factory springs. Helps, gives it a little bit more arch, or roughly a 2-inch lift, and then you can get a 4-inch block underneath that. Most lift kits or whatever don't usually go over a 4-inch because of the amount of leverage it will cause on that spring, especially if you're out playing around in the mud or four-wheeling and stuff like that, and you stomp on the gas or anything like that. The twist in the axle, want to twist the spring, it'll damage your spring if you go any higher than that. Some guys even like go as far as putting like a traction style bar on the bottom of that perch there up to the frame. Give it a little bit of a preload to keep that axle from twisting and bending up those springs. So I know we've all seen that, but this truck, because we put our front 6-inch springs on there, is now 2 to 3 inches higher than the rear. And we need to get this rear up to at least be level with the front, and well, since it has a 4-inch block in it already, adding any more to that block is not good. It's not, I don't think it'll work out very well. That's a lot of leverage to put on that spring, and you'll probably just end up twisting everything up. So we are going to try to fit these 6-inch rear lift springs underneath the back of this truck, get rid of the blocks, and give it just a little more stability. You know, try to lessen the leverage we have on the spring. And I've managed to mock up our passenger side. And here, let me show you what we've got. Went on eBay, ordered a set of leaf spring mounts, as you can see there. Got one there, got one back here. Now you can see, if you're familiar with that, I actually have that one flipped because it would be the spring would be too far or too high, right? The lift, I think, would be a little extreme, so I just went ahead and flipped it. And we could change all that later by adding a longer shackle to get a little more lift, maybe a shorter one to lessen the lift, you know, give ourselves some options. But there is that rear mount. Here is our front mount. And then you can see here, our spring perch is just sitting on there. Once I get our pinion angle about where I want it, then I'll go ahead and weld all this stuff up. But you can see there is no block in there. And we have one heck of a gap between the top of our bed quarter and our hub. So we have got a nice, pretty hefty lift going on back here. Now you can also tell I've only got each one of these mounts held in place with 2 bolts. One here, one there. Of course, then you got one there, one on the other side. Once I get our axle sitting where I want it, and I know that our mounts are about where I want it, then I'll go ahead, mark out the rest of the holes, get everything drilled, get it all bolted up, trim what I need off of these mounts because, well, they don't go to this truck, so some of it might stick up higher or lower and look a little silly on the frame, so that'll have to be cut off as well. And what I mean by that, our rear mount kind of hangs down below our frame a little bit and would look silly if I left it. Now you can leave it that way if you want, but I'm going to go ahead and trim it off. And I'll do that by coming up the top of this hole here, rounding it off, kind of making it look like what we have going on here. Mark our holes, drill them, get everything bolted up. Bob's your uncle, right? And our front, well, the front I will do a little bit different. Once I get those all set up, then I'll go ahead, drill another hole in here, get that bolted up. If I got room, like see this hole here will line up pretty good. I'll get another bolt in there. And then you can see we have those guys that stick up. But I also had to cut the bed mount, right, which is also riveted to the frame. So what I'll do is I can cut those ears off, line everything up with the ears on our bed mount, and I can weld that whole section together, and that will make our bed mount, shackle mount, one unit and possibly that much stronger. So that's what I've got going on. Took me all day about to do this, of cursing, cussing, and throwing tools. Like I said, that way now that I get over to our driver's side, it might sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna go ahead and get you guys in the stand, and we'll start marking out our rivets, getting those cut out. We'll get the U-bolts off, we'll get that block out of there, get this rear end floating on our floor jack, and then we can start going in to the next part of this video. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's start getting these things cut out. Good. I still have your attention. That's awesome. And if I have still held your attention this far in the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe for me. Okay, turn on notifications too. All right, enough being weird. So you saw there on the video, we got our U-bolts undone, got those off, got the U-bolts out. We made relief cuts in our rivets on our shackle mounts with our death wheel. Use our air hammer to cut the rivets off. Use the center punch in our air hammer to knock the rivets in. Relief cut the bed mount up front there. And took a flap disc to our frame rail to knock off all the high rust spots. So we got all that cleaned up. I've gone ahead and, as you can see here, thrown our leaf spring up in place. There are our new mounts. Those are just sitting up there. And this is, it's snug, but not tight because I still have to locate our spring mounts, and they're snug enough to keep the spring from falling. And if you've ever had to mess with any of these springs, they're pretty heavy. They will mash your toes for sure. So, but now that we got all that cut out, we got our frame rail cleaned up, and our spring is set up in place. This side over here is definitely probably the most important side, because, well, we already got the passenger side pretty much roughed in where I wanted it, and it's bolted, right? We got 2 bolts in each mount. It's kind of snugged up to our axle, and that's about where it's gonna live. Now, we need to match that side, because if we're off a little bit, like, it's a good way to make this thing crab walk down the road, right? Those trucks that drive sideways. You get this off one, a little bit farther or behind the other side. Does a lot of rear steer type stuff, right? So we need to take some measurements. And now here's what I've done to help locate everything. Like I said on the other side, our rear mount uses an existing hole that is already there off our original shackle mount. So I went ahead and just put that bolt in, got it snug. Got our mount here clocked to where it needs to be, so I can mark up there now to get the new hole center punched and drilled out. Went to the passenger side, because the distance between this point here on our mount and this point here is 43 inches. So, we said we went over there, we grabbed a tape measure, marked the distance, and then took a mental note of how it the orientation of it, because we know on the passenger side, it sits around the bed mount, so we had to cut and clearance that. And on that side, I used our little tabs. If I can find them, there we go. These are the tabs I cut off of the bed mount, right? The ears on the sides there, and I use these to help distance this. So if you look, show you, I got one between the mount and what's left of the bed. That gives me my distance between the mount and the bed. I can zoom in on the other side, you can see it's a pretty tight gap. Now if you also look over there, our mount kind of goes halfway through that hole underneath the bolt. So we've got this one set up to where it does the same thing. And then once that bolt is in place and tightened, as you can see, I've already drilled it out. This guy here will go between our mount and what's left of the bed mount, and that'll help get my distance between, there we go, between this guy and our bed mount. That way it splits the difference between both sides. We can tighten this up, and then to get the orientation for this guy, so we can go ahead and center punch and drill out our next hole. And then both of our spring mounts should be in the, well, should be in the same spot. The distance will be the same, and I've done everything to mimic that side to make sure our bolts are the same. Now, like I said too, none of this will be finalized just yet. We're gonna get it bolted up, get it tight, get loosen up our U-bolts here too, because now that we've got our springs about where we need them, we need to get the axle centered under the truck. So we'll go ahead and loosen these guys up as well. Take some measurements between our spring and our backing plate to get the distances correct. Try not to put our springs in too much of a bind, make sure they're still hanging level. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the bolts drilled out on this frame rail, get those guys in place, get our rear swing shackle installed as well, and I'll bring you guys back and we'll center this thing up under the truck. All right, holes have been drilled. Each one of our shackle mounts have been bolted up, 2 bolts in each mount. So there's that guy there. Come back here, there is our other guy. And our rear mount is in there as well. We got the other one up on top, and each mount has a bolt running through it. Now, they're all long, so there is no nuts on the end of them. I'm not gonna tighten them up just yet, but they do stick through the other side a pretty good distance, so I'm not worried about them coming out. The truck is also sitting under its own weight, so you can see now we got our shackle angles. The truck is, let's see, yep, it is sitting under its own weight. Now I have already gone ahead and centered up our axle. The passenger side leaf spring perch has been tack welded into place. That's to help keep the rear end from twisting on me. And basically all I did was I went from our center pin there to our backing plate. So let's open this guy up here. Let's get some, there we go. So basically just went off our backing plate on each side and went to our center pin here. And we've got roughly 6 1/16, 6 1/8 on each side, and I did that. I measured it and centered it up with the U-bolts loosened up and everything hanging, right? So now it's the gravity. I'm using gravity to help me make sure our springs are straight up and down. Got the roughly the same amount of load on each side, and then just took our measuring tape, went from the top of our center pin to our backing plate, measured each side, split the difference, came up with 6 1/16. 6 1/8, somewhere in that area, give or take a 32nd, or whatever the smallest line is on this thing. So, got that set up, tack welded our passenger side leaf spring perch in place to help keep our rear end from rotating. So now that we have all that set, and I kind of like where it's at, I have got the passenger side tire already bolted up to the truck. I'm gonna get the driver's side on right now. We'll get this thing sitting down on the ground. I'm gonna back it out and let's do a walk around. Let's see where this thing sits, right? Because I bought mounts, cut mounts off, put new mounts on, and just used my best guess on where things should be placed to kind of keep our ride height the same, if not slightly higher in the back. Now, if that becomes an issue and I need to lower the truck, well, I really don't have all that much more room to go since I've pretty much tucked it into the bottom of the bed. what I'll end up doing if I need to is we'll get the rear end off and we'll pull this center pin and we'll take out one of these leaves. We'll take out this guy right here. For one, it's not being held in place by any of these guys. This one's just kind of a floater. So we'll pull that one out. We can put this overload back in, and that should drop the truck roughly a ½ inch. It'll bring it down just a little bit, right? And take some of the spring on it, which might soften up the ride a little, which would be nice because let's face it, these are rough country springs and they ride like a truck. So if I need to, I can take that spring out, bolt the pack back together, soften the ride up a little bit, and probably get about a ½ inch drop. Now I can change a lot of that stuff too by these shackles up here. If I wanted to, you can see the gap in here. If I really wanted to, I could re-drill holes. Buy aftermarket shackles with multiple holes, right? So we can really finalize the height. And because it's back here, here's something you should realize too. For every inch, if you split it in the difference, so if you got an inch longer shackle, you get a ½ inch of lift right here in the middle. So keep that in mind if that's something you want to do. So yeah, we got everything bolted up. I'm gonna get this wheel on. We'll get this thing backed out of the shop, do a walk around, and let's see where we ended up. Truck is out of the shop and I've got it sitting on, well, I would almost kind of the flattest ground I have here. It's all uphills, downhills. But now remember earlier in this video when I was setting up the passenger side or setting up the rear springs, I said I moved it back about an inch, which should help with the clearance issue between the front of the tire and the front edge of our rear quarter. And well, it helped out a lot. The wheel actually looks like it belongs there, which is freaking awesome. Another thing, the truck looks to be pretty darn level, right? And I thought I'd have to do a little bit of finessing, changing a couple things here and there, but the old calibrated eyeball seems to work. So I got the perches in the right spot. That is awesome. The truck just looks absolutely cool. So like I said, let's do a walk around. So here is our truck. You can see it looks fairly level. Well, for the ground that it is on, our rear wheel fits that wheelhouse much better than it did before. But the 6-inch lift just made this thing a much, much cooler truck. All right, our wheels, see if I got them setting up just right. They look to be about, oh yeah, in the same spot. I can't pay too much attention to this side. This wheel holding is in, and this guy's bent out. You see it's got a little bit of damage, so. But it does look close, judging by the front. You can see on this side as well, where it sits. Looks pretty darn good. So now what I need to do is start working on rear shock mounts. Yes, I got to do that too. All right, I ordered some tabs for the front. We can get those kind of spotted and welded up on that front axle so we can get our front shocks located. The rear ones, I think I'll order another set of like universal, but not the tab style. I'll go ahead and I'll get the mounts that will allow you to have different locations, right? It's got 3 or 4 holes in it. It'll allow you to bolt up your shock a little more, a little less, if you need to extend your travel or limit your actual travel. And then they've got on the factory cross member where these shocks are at, we can get up in here, and what I'll do is I'll make some sleeves or something. We'll pull these shocks out, get rid of them, put a sleeve in there, and the longer bolt goes through, and then move the shock to the outside of this mount That way it lines up better with our axle down here with that universal one that I'll use to give us the 3 holes for length adjustments. And that should set everything up pretty good. I'll keep them almost orientated the same as the factory ones. A little bit of an angle, like nothing real drastic, but just a little. That might help with, I don't know, maybe the side to side because of the arch in these springs. We'll see though, once we get on the road and start actually driving it, we'll figure out how that is. I might even have to come up with some kind of track bar system, maybe. So, but that is in the future. Right now, I still have about 500,000 holes to drill, hardware to put in, and making sure I get all the swing shackle clearance bolts, all that stuff, right? I still got a lot of hardware to install to get this thing fully buttoned up. And there's a lot of other little things here and there on this truck, so. But that's where this truck is right now. Part 2 of the suspension is, well, that's about where it's gonna sit. Doesn't look like I gotta move anything, right? And this has just been a project. It's been his project for a while. And I'm glad I can chip in and help out and kind of help him, you know, help his vision, help see his vision through. So this thing's really cool. And one of our many projects. Speaking of projects, I still have 2 back here that I do really plan on getting to. Like that Ranger. I've been collecting parts for upcoming projects on that, for upcoming videos, and that one should be a lot of fun. And our newest one, as a matter of fact, that is payment for working on that. So, Cadillac Escalade, right? It's got a 6-liter in it with a spun bearing. I don't know which bearing. We're just going to yank it out and set it off to the corner. But they're all-wheel drive. Things should be fun. Should be a fun little project. We got a couple more weeks. We're trying to see if we can get a title for it. If not, then what do you guys think? What should I do with it? Right? I've got a couple of ideas, but I want to hear what you guys think. What should I do with that all-wheel drive Cadillac? Let me know. Should be fun. But like I said, you guys, I got a lot of holes to drill. I got a little bit of cleanup to do as well. And I gotta get ready to go back to work. So, hope you guys liked the video. Hope you enjoyed. Give me a thumbs up, right? Definitely helps a guy out. Share this. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, for hanging out, for all your guys' support. Hope this motivates you to get out there, like, just buy parts. Buy parts, have a vision, execute it. So, but thank you guys. Thanks again for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.